Marlon confidently walked up to the club, his sharp suit catching everyone's eye. But when he reached the door, the bouncer stopped him cold. "Members only," he said, without even checking his name. Marlon tried to explain, but the bouncer just shrugged it off. What happened next shocked even the most untouchable. But let's start from the beginning. At the entrance of the exclusive Manhattan Club, the night buzzed with the energy of privilege and power. Marlon Harris, a black businessman in his late 30s, stood poised, exuding an air of confidence that suggested he'd walked through these gates many times before. His tailored suit was sharp, his movements deliberate, every detail of his appearance designed to convey control and elegance. Yet, as he approached the velvet ropes, the doorman, Ethan, tall, muscular, and with a face that betrayed no emotion, locked eyes with him, his gaze cold and unyielding. "Sorry, sir. Members only," Ethan said flatly, his tone flat as a sheet of stone. He didn't even take a moment to glance at Marlon's face or check for a name, as if dismissing him was a routine part of his job. Marlon stood frozen for a second, his mind racing. This was not just any club. It was the kind of place where power brokers, politicians, and celebrities mingled, where being denied entry was unthinkable for someone like him. He had never been turned away from a venue like this, not once. He was used to being the one in control, the one everyone respected, the one they made room for. "I'm here to meet someone," he said, his voice smooth, but carrying a quiet edge. He tried to mask the frustration creeping into his chest, but it was hard. This wasn't the first time he had encountered such a treatment, but it was the first time it had happened so blatantly, in full view of the city's elite. Ethan's response was immediate, almost rehearsed. "No exceptions," he said again, his tone indifferent, as though this conversation had taken place 100 times before. Marlon's eyes narrowed. The air seemed to thicken between them, the unspoken line between simple rejection and something more insidious hanging in the air. He could feel it, the subtle but unmistakable sting of being judged by something beyond his appearance, beyond his worth. But Ethan's stance never wavered, unyielding, unbothered. The city's glittering skyline seemed far away as Marlon stood there, unable to move. Marlon stood frozen for a moment, a mixture of disbelief and humiliation washing over him. He had always prided himself on handling rejection with grace, but this felt different. There was something about the way Ethan had looked at him, the dismissive tone, the total lack of acknowledgement that stung deeper than any previous encounter. He had faced discrimination before, but this, in front of the club's polished, exclusive crowd, felt like an attack on everything he had worked so hard to achieve. He turned away, his mind racing, desperate to suppress the rising tide of emotions. His pride was in pieces, shattered by a simple, unnecessary rejection. But as he walked, the sharp sound of laughter drifted through the air. A group of club members, lounging inside the glass-walled entrance, had witnessed the entire exchange. He could feel their eyes on him, their smirks cutting through the cold night air. They weren't even trying to hide it. Their laughter rang out, mocking his retreat. Each glance, each quiet chuckle, felt like a calculated insult. Ethan stood tall behind the velvet ropes, his expression a perfect mask of smugness. The corners of his mouth twitched upwards, as if he had just won some small, unspoken victory. He looked at Marlon with an air of superiority, almost as if he had proven something, though Marlon knew deep down that the only thing Ethan had truly demonstrated was his ignorance. The injustice of it all began to settle like a weight in Marlon's chest. He was a businessman, a self-made man, and yet, in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. His accomplishments, his reputation, his status, none of it was enough to earn him basic decency, not here. It wasn't just about being turned away. It was about the way it made him feel, as though all his years of hard work had led to nothing more than a humiliating door slammed in his face. His anger flared, hot and sharp. He wanted to shout, to demand the respect he knew he deserved, but he bit his tongue. Marlon was no fool. He knew how to pick his battles. And this wasn't the battle to fight. Not yet. But the sting, the bitter sting of injustice, stayed with him, gnawing at him. It was more than just a personal insult. It felt like a direct affront to everything he had built. Inside the club, the air was thick with the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of music that blended effortlessly into the backdrop of elite conversation. The contrast between the extravagant inside world and Marlon's current reality felt like a slap in the face. He stood just outside, fuming, his mind racing. The rejection had never been about a simple club policy. It was a reminder that no matter his success, no matter his influence, to these people, he was just another black man who didn't belong. He had built himself from the ground up, a partner at several high-profile companies, a man with power and connections. Yet, in the span of a few seconds, Ethan, the doorman, had reduced him to nothing more than a target for mockery. The unfairness of it clung to him, and with each passing moment, the frustration deepened into something sharper, more dangerous. His jaw clenched as the bitterness of the experience consumed him. This wasn't just about being rejected. It was about the subtle, constant reminder of how the world saw him. He couldn't let this slide. Marlon's resolve hardened, a flash of determination flickering in his eyes. He wasn't going to stand idly by and let this insult define him. In a swift motion, he pulled out his phone, his fingers dialed with purpose. "Get me in touch with the club's owner. Now!" He barked at his assistant, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of fury. His assistant, quick and efficient, didn't hesitate. "I'll arrange it right away," she responded, and within minutes, Marlon was on the phone with Charles McGregor, the wealthy investor and owner of the club. What Ethan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marlon had recently become one of McGregor's largest investors. This wasn't just a minor connection. This was leverage. The owner was now a player in Marlon's world, not the other way around. Marlon's lips curled into a small, knowing smile as the phone call continued. Ethan's dismissal, as casually as it had been, was about to come back in ways he never could have anticipated. An hour later, Marlon stood before Charles McGregor in the plush, dimly lit lounge of the club. McGregor's face shifted from surprise to confusion as he learned of the situation. "I had no idea you were even at the door, Mr. Harris," he said, genuinely shocked. Marlon, maintaining his composure, leaned forward. "I was turned away, Charles, by your employee, Ethan, and I thought it was important you know exactly how your club treats its patrons." McGregor, visibly upset, immediately demanded an explanation from Ethan. The doorman, now red-faced, stammered out a weak apology, realizing too late that his bias had cost him more than his pride. Later that night, Ethan was dismissed from his post, and the club issued a public apology to Marlon. As he left, the weight of injustice lifted off his shoulders. Marlon wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who had been respected for his intellect, not for the color of his skin. His victory wasn't just in the firing of a racist employee. It was in proving that his worth couldn't be denied.